Welcome to the A Minute to Midnight show, folks. This is Tony coming to you from New Zealand, and I have with me in America two fellow moderators on the A Minute to Midnight Facebook group, Fred and Gary. Gary H. We have two Garys that do it, but only one of them's here today. So, yeah, great to be chatting to you guys anyway.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, Tony. Good to be here.
And just in the last few minutes, we found out about Donald Trump's impeachment. So I suppose we should really launch into a little bit of a short discussion on that and what it means, guys.
Yeah. Well, the impeachment is pretty frustrating from my end. I've not really followed it very closely because I kind of already knew the outcome. And earlier when we were talking about the reasons for impeachment, they're pretty weak. And I'm just kind of appalled that our half of our government, or the Democratic side, chose to go down this route. And the only thing I can think of, at the end of the day, he'll probably be acquitted in the other house, and then that'll be the good fodder for when they're fighting him for re-election, on the campaign trail.
Okay, so Gary, before I throw to you, I'll just read a little bit of information. This is pretty fresh from theguardian.com, where it says the Democrats have voted to impeach US President Donald Trump on the first article, and then later on they impeached him on the second one a few minutes later. The vote makes the 45th president only the third commander-in-chief to face that penalty. It followed a day-long showdown that's been boiling for years between the Republicans loyal to Trump and the Democrats. Impeachment will subject Trump to what former President Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter called a profound disgrace. Well, they weren't exactly great men, those two. That stains the president's legacy forever. Only two presidents have been impeached, Andrew Johnson in 1868 and Bill Clinton in 1998. Richard Nixon chose to resign instead. A majority of the House representatives then voted for the second article of impeachment of obstruction of Congress after the first article, which they passed, abuse of power. So what that actually means is that it seems that the Senate will host a trial in January on whether to convict or remove Trump from office, but it's likely that they will not actually remove him from office. So, but the thing is, it looks to me like this is just a classic divide people ploy. Gary, what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with that. And I agree with Fred too. They didn't have much to go on, and it just seems like they were highly motivated from the beginning, from the election in 2016, that they were going to do this, and really didn't matter what they came up with. They were just going to go through with this no matter what. I saw a little bit before we got on a couple of the speeches, just bits and pieces of a couple of the speeches that were actually pretty good, that made some good points about this, that there really wasn't much to it, and it was just, it's just being used to divide the country and divide the politics.
Which it certainly is, because there's a lot of division between those that wanted impeachment and those that didn't, apparently, according to polls. Actually, this morning, before this impeachment, apparently there was a new poll released by, let me just find this, Gallup's poll. It had indicated that 51% of Americans opposed the removing of the president from office and 45% supported it. That's according to this poll. Other news outlet polls, the mainstream media have put it closer to 48 and 48, but that's the Gallup's poll. So whatever way you look at it, America's divided over this, it would have seemed to me.
I think America is more deeply divided than ever before. The division, in my mind, is terribly deep, and this causes it to get even more intense. And I was just thinking about when I walked into. Well, actually, my son was doing that curling, and that's that where you slide the thing on ice.
Yep.
And Trump happened to be there as he was doing this curling game. And so I went there and I thought, oh, heck, I'll just see what's going on. And some guy was selling hats. I bought a hat, Trump 2020 hat. And I liked it. It was a really nice hat. I have it on my shelf still. But anyway, I walked into a restaurant wearing that hat. And let me tell you, I didn't get any thumbs up. I just got people kind of looking at me like in wonder, like, why would you wear a hat like that? I mean, I could have wore a hat that started, like a black hat that's with big block white letters that started with an F and ended with a U, and nobody would have paid any mind to it. But I walked in there with a Trump hat on, and people just looked and I was just like, whoa, am I going to get beat up here or something? And this was in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and I was I'll never forget that. And so that just told me the emotion runs so deep that a person can't even have a choice. If I saw somebody with a Obama hat on or a Joe Biden hat on, I'd be like, I'm sorry, that's about the extent of it. Not like, oh, I want to beat the tar out of you because you differ from my opinion. And that is just getting deep. That feeling, hopefully I conveyed that in that little story, but that is getting deeper and deeper, and it's going to reach a boiling point one time, or a flash point is probably a better word for it. And once that happens, then we will be divided, and it may even be a violent civil war.
See, most people would know I'm not a huge Trump fan, looking at it from the outside sort of perspective on it. But having said that, I also detest this kind of what I would call kangaroo court that's happened here to do this, whether you like Trump or not is almost irrelevant. It's just the fact that they've used this crazy situation to bring it to this point is the way I look at it and think, yeah, it's just division. But earlier in the day before the impeachment, Trump himself tweeted and he said, "Can you believe that I will be impeached today by the radical left, do-nothing Democrats, and I did nothing wrong? A terrible day. Read the transcripts. This should never happen to another president again. Say a prayer." That's what Trump tweeted. And in his 6-page letter he'd written, "I wish to express my strongest and most powerful protest against the partisan impeachment crusade being pursued by the Democrats in the House of Representatives." So, yeah, I mean, I think to me it's like whether you're pro or anti-Trump or whatever, it just seems to me like this was a setup from the outset, that they wanted this and they were going to find a way to do it. And when Obama was in power, it didn't matter about his fake birth certificate. Nobody impeached him.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah, they didn't even try.
Well, yeah, they should have. But anyway, you mentioned, or the president mentioned, read the transcripts. I did read the transcripts, and I don't know where these guys dredged this crap out of. And I also read a transcript of some of our senators going over to the Ukraine, what appears to be extorting money from the Ukraine people or government. I don't recall exactly. I remember the Illinois Senator Dick Durbin, his name was in there, and I was just appalled. And I'm like, these guys are pushing the button on Trump for what he said, and what they said was just like, I wish I had that transcript because I'd love to read it again. And I'm not sure if it was on Fox News or where I saw it, but it was pretty pretty damning for those guys, for those senators that went over there. And no wonder after I read that, and I guess it happens pretty regularly. I mean, when you go into office, with thousands in the bank, and you leave with millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions, you kind of wonder where that came from. And that kind of answered the question a little bit to me. And also the pressure that these guys put on, the corrupt pressure that these guys put on this government was just wrong. And just reading this one letter, I don't know all the other letters and everything else, but they go marching around to other governments and put this pressure on for their own personal gain. And no wonder why most everybody is getting to hate the United States.
And you remind me of the thing that I was talking about that I read, and I've seen this a couple different places that, and maybe this is part of the same thing you're talking about. This was a headline: Democrats stole billions in U.S. aid to Ukraine, laundered it to themselves, and then so they're trying to impeach Trump to stop the investigation into that. And I think there's quite several of these things that went on, and this is one reason why they have pushed this so strongly, is to keep the spotlight off of themselves. And this happens all the time. I don't know if that's wag the dog or what you call that, but this sort of thing happens all the time. So that may be part of the motivation behind this. Whatever it was, they didn't really have much to go on. That's for sure.
To me, this is you mentioned it. That I think, Tony, you mentioned it. Distraction. This is what's going on here. I wonder. I mean, this is just. I just can't believe grown men do this. Ones that are out of jail. Anyway, is this just a grand distraction for something that's brewing underneath? I mean, we got to be aware of kind of everything as right. We go. I mean, the year end, a lot of people say things are really going to unravel now and that kind of thing, and it's usually in September when they say that. But I think, and I'm going to make a video of this on my own channel on YouTube, but I think that 2020 is going to be a year of reckoning, and it's going to be just going to be a mess. Things are going to start happening, and I think when things happen, our system is so set up for all these dominoes to fall that they're going to go quickly, and people won't have a chance to respond and prepare. So now's the time to prepare. And so back to the impeachment thing, is it just a big smokescreen, or is it I'm sure it's a multifaceted game they're playing, but
yeah.
Tell our listeners your YouTube channel, Fred.
Okay. My YouTube channel is E.T. Prepper, E as an end, T as in times, N times Prepper, E.T. Prepper. And I try to encourage people to prepare. That's the basic message of what I talk about. And I boil it down to, well, we need to prepare and be ready for the coming days. And those coming days, I think we all can see they're getting closer and closer.
Well, I was just going to say that, Fred, you mentioned something about civil war, possibility of civil war. And I think no matter which way this impeachment thing went, I think it is getting people geared up, riled up, whatever, stirred up, so that I think if he doesn't get impeached, which, like we say, that's probably not going to happen as far as the final vote. But, the left is going to be more unhinged than ever, I think, if they're not getting their way here. And if we move towards the election, if it looks like he's going to be elected, I think that's going to get people very excited. And then there's so many other things, like you said, Fred, coming down the pike, that, basically there's just chaos in everywhere you look. and that's just going to make it that much easier for a civil war to start, I think.
Yeah. So I'm with Fred, the ET prepper, and Gary Huffman. And there's certainly a lot that is going on all over the place around the world at the moment. And just we are in crazy times, guys.
Yeah, we are.
Yep, we certainly are. And one of the things that we need to encourage everybody to do is prepare your physically you want to prepare, but get in God's word. We need to get spiritually prepared. If we're not there, nobody's going to get out of this alive. And so my wife was at her friend's house, and the house across the street started burning. And turns out that the guy was in the garage with a shot, and he shot himself. And that guy's, there's desperation and all that. And the way this society is acting, it's getting more and more desperate, and people have less and less. And that guy didn't have much hope, and he ended up committing suicide and burning his house to hide himself. But where's that guy now? Most likely that guy is stuck in the wrong side of eternity. I say, are you going to be in the smoking section or non-smoking? And, I'm going to be in the non-smoking. How about you?
Good one. Well, I agree with Fred. we all need to be ET preppers for sure, because that's where we're at. And one thing I agree absolutely. We need to be ready spiritually, and part of that, I think, is realizing that we may have to give up some things. May not be as comfortable in the future as what we're used to. Can we get through that gracefully, trusting in the Lord, still being loving to our neighbors or whatever, when things are not quite as comfortable. I mean, you've talked about the grand solar minimum that we're in, and that's going to get heavy duty. That's going to change a lot of things, and we're not going to be as comfortable in that way as what we have been in the past. So anyway, just being able to trust the Lord through all of that and adjusting to that, that we're not going to be able to order everything we want off of Amazon or whatever it might be. It's going to be a different life coming down the pike, I really believe.
It's interesting that you mentioned the grand solar minimum, because obviously this is one of the things that I must say I feel pretty frustrated about, is this climate alarmism. And boy, is that ramped up in 2019, It's just totally ramped up to the next level of driving everyone into this supposed climate emergency panic mode, when I think it's just a load of nonsense, to be honest, this man-made climate change. And it looks to me like a grand solar minimum is where we're heading rather than global warming, which there's going to be some egg on the faces of people in the future, but meanwhile they will have enacted a whole lot of laws that affect all of us around the globe badly.
Yeah, economically, it's going to hurt everybody. There's just more and more fees. I work for a small business, and we're feed to death. We're based out of Illinois, and Illinois just had a $49 billion tax increase where they taxed just everything, and like license plate fees doubled in some cases and more in other cases. The gas tax, if you buy diesel fuel, more than doubled. It went from 21 to 45 cents a gallon, which affects truck drivers, And so it just all these fees and expenses are just killing us. And then when you add the carbon credits and all this other stuff that the big businesses are going to have to pay, and the states and governments are going to have to pay to somebody, it's very counterproductive. No, the only people that are winning are the people that are pulling those strings, and everybody else loses. And so that Al Gore's little game of climate change or global warming or whatever you want to call it, whatever it's going to morph into next. Maybe it's going to be the Republicans' fault for making it cool down so fast or something. I don't know, but it's very clear that the sun puts out so much energy, and when the sun has a little blip and doesn't put out 1 zillion whatever BTUs a second, and it puts out 999 whatever, just that little minuscule amount affects the Earth greatly, and we're such a, our system, the solar system, everything is at such a fine-tuned balance. It's just amazing. I heard, I don't remember why, but lightning is like a ping in the atmosphere, and there's like 5,500 an hour around the globe. And for some reason, that needs the atmosphere needs that pinging of the lightning, and it's just amazing. All these different things that God created. I mean, this big blob of soup out there in the middle of nowhere that created itself out of nothing, like the Darwinists think. Well, anyway, primordial soup, I guess. It just can't be it. It's just so wound together so perfectly. It's like like this precise clock that's just ticking away, working perfectly. Everything affects it in a way that keeps perfect time, and that's what's happening with Earth. And then there's these knuckleheads that say, "Oh, we're causing this." Well, they're pretty darn proud that we're so big that we cause this global warming, or back in the 80s it was the CFCs, and it's just ridiculous, and uninformed people fall for it, and if you do a little homework, you see right through it.
Thing is, most people don't do the homework, and they don't see right through it because they're indoctrinated. But let's just for a minute get to the roots of this whole thing. The climate change, climate alarmism thing. It all began really with a fellow called Maurice Strong, and he was the guy that put the United Nations into the environmental business, basically in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, till he died. In 89, Maurice Strong was appointed Secretary General of the Earth Summit, and he said to thousands of climate change delegates back then, "It's clear that the current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class, involving high meat intake, consumption of large amounts of frozen and convenience foods, use of fossil fuels, appliances, home and workplace air conditioning, and suburban housing are not sustainable." Basically, though, Maurice Strong himself had a 200,000 acre cattle farm. So how do you reconcile that? He made his money in the oil business, but his cattle farm or ranch he called it Baca or Baca, and he was told by a mystic that Baca or Baca, however you pronounce it, would become the center for a new planetary order, which would evolve from the economic collapse and environmental catastrophes that would sweep around the globe in the years to come. And as a result of those revelations from the supposed mystic, he formed a New Age institution on his Baca ranch. And he's the guy that pulled off the coup of basically, well, the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, arose out of something called the UNFCCC, which he basically got off the ground from the Earth Summit in Rio. And That was 1992, and it's evolved into the UN's panel on climate change now. So it's all the brainchild, basically, of Maurice Strong, who was a Luciferian, basically, with a New Age theology, and that is where we get it all from. And so it's just evolved into what we've got today. But you've got to realise that it was Maurice Strong that got the whole thing off the ground to where we are now. And and there's just so much nonsense around this. I've got a bunch of stuff here I could roll off, but I'll let you guys have a bit of a spiel before I do.
Well, he was obviously a very religious man, quote unquote, New Ager, Luciferian, like you say. And it seems like most of this climate hype has a very religious thing to it. The Extinction Rebellion, have you seen any of the videos of people doing the demonstrations around the world?
You should
Rebellion?
Explain a bit to people that don't know what it is.
Well, if I can. So they call it either XR or Extinction Rebellion. Even their symbol is a very occult symbol, and I don't know if I can even. It's supposed to look like an hourglass, but there's much more to it, and I haven't read recently about it, so I couldn't even tell you what the rest of the symbolism is, but there's very occult symbolism even to the symbol that they're using. But it is basically they're just saying we're gonna stop. We're gonna go stop traffic, stop important things happening, wherever they go, because the climate is the most important thing, and we are going to force the governments of the world to act now, because, we're going to all die in 12 years if we don't hurry up and do something. So, but their demonstrations, the things that they do out there are very much steeped in occult rituals. They do all kinds of different rituals during these demonstrations, it's more than just, people with a sign demonstrating. And besides that, it's all being bought and paid for by the billionaires out there that are manipulating all of this. Most of the people, it's not working people, it's just people that get paid, and they can go out there and actually, they may not even have a job anyway. So they're going out there and doing this demonstrating. And whether they believe that much in it or not, they're getting paid. So they're going to be out there, just doing their paid job, basically. But they're getting swept into this religious occult movement at the same time. So it's very interesting what's going on, but it's happening all around the world.
Yeah, and it's a pseudoscience is what I've seen it called by some real scientists, the whole global warming scam.
Well, the global warming thing. Yeah, absolutely.
But even like in New Zealand, we have an outfit called NIWA, which does their climate analysis and forecasting and all that. And, they've come out and said Wellington, which is the capital in New Zealand, will experience 16 times as many heat wave days by the end of the century. And days topping 30 degrees Celsius could start occurring if current climate change levels continue. That's in Wellington, because Wellington doesn't very often get to 30 degrees Celsius, which is really not that hot compared to a lot of places. But while the region can expect warmer temperatures and can also expect more rain and heavy downpours and so on, NIWA actually stands for the National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research, and they've painted a grim picture for the Wellington region. But the thing is, you see, they're using these jolly models, these climate change models, which some are saying are completely flawed. How on earth you come up with a figure of 16 times the heat wave days? All it is just alarmism that they have no clue about, because they're using models that, there's other people that are saying the climate models are nonsense. But then you get the Greater Wellington Regional Council Committee Chairman Thomas Nash, saying, as well as reducing emissions, we need to plan for these changes, especially in relation to our water supply, our food production, and our buildings. And he also said the report shows that we need to, reduce emissions, and it's a call to action. See, what are they talking about? How they're going to food supply and energy and all of that. It's based on these alarmist reports. You've got to ask why. Why is this big push right now? And even I notice in my town here, there's a couple of signs gone up in the last 2 days, like billboards. The last couple of days I've seen them, saying the climate is changing. Are you? Stuff like this. It's just, why are they pushing us right now with all of this, guys? What do you think?
What do you think, Fred?
I think it's just it seems like it's like conspiratorial. It just there's people that are pushing the buttons and all that, and I think we give them too much credit. We need to put credit where credit's due, and that would be Satan himself. He's the one that is I believe causing these people to the timing of all this stuff to happen at certain times and that kind of thing. And as a result, and I'm sure he empowers certain people like Soros and all that to fund things and to get Satan's message across, and which is death and destruction. And so far he's doing a good job of it. And I just think that really it's a satanic thing. It comes down to all these people are being prompted, I believe, by the unholy spirit, if you want to call it that. Excuse me. And I think that's what's happening here. It just seems too big, too grand. The timing seems too perfect, where there's just random people doing the same thing and acting the same way and saying similar stuff, and it just seems that a human entity couldn't put this together, or a human group.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I mentioned the climate models, like they were basing things on these models, going to be 16 times worse by the end of the century and all of that. And you get a guy called Dr. Nakamura, who was a top climate modeler and, Japanese, and he says the models have become useless pieces of junk, or worse, in a sense that they can produce gravely misleading outputs when they're used for climate forecasting. There's a whole heap of other scientists that debunk all of this, including a New Zealand scientist who was a top New Zealand scientist, David Kerr, who was a former director of New Zealand's Department of Scientific Industrial Research, and he calls it global warming pseudoscience. But the thing is, like Fred, you mentioned, a satanic plot. These people are just silenced. Their voices that, like pushing water uphill with a rake, because there seems to be this agenda to get us somewhere regardless of facts.
Well,
Exactly.
That's the thing. You pointed out a while ago, there's those boxes that monitor the temperatures around, and now the boxes are smaller, they're quicker, they monitor more stuff, and the temperature change quicker. I forget exactly what it was. But if you go and say, this is the new data, and we all go by it, and all of a sudden, look at this change, because, well, the data is different. It's a different set of data. You've got to collect the data the exact same way you've done. I used to work in a test lab. So the data is, you can sandbag. I could, as a running a test, I could design a test and I could run it on it was on tractors, International Harvester tractors. But let's say we were doing a sound test or a structural test, and I could sandbag a test so easy, just by tweaking the numbers or tweaking the instruments or tweaking there's many parameters. It's so easy to sandbag numbers, and that's why when I see numbers out there, I don't believe these numbers are. I just don't believe them. You have to kind of boil it down in your mind, and you got to get your source from like 15 different other spots, and then you might be able to get some sort of true number or true indication of whatever you're looking at.
Yeah, Stevenson's screens, I think, were the things, those boxes that.
Oh yeah,
and that was specifically, dealing with Australia, and but Australia is a good case in point at the moment because they're really in this alarmist mode. They're over this heat wave they're having there at the moment, and calling it like unprecedented and all of that kind of thing because that fits the agenda. Yeah, I mean it's really hot in parts of Australia, but actually Australia is one of the few places in the southern hemisphere that has records going back to like 1876 in the same spots. And apparently there's a website called Real Climate Science, and they show there that 25 locations across Australia with mean temperature data going back to then. The hottest year was 1902. The second hottest was 2018. And there has been no global warming or no warming in Australia since 1876, basically. It's these cycles, but 1902 was the hottest. And how about 1896 in Australia? A 24-day heat wave on Australia's east coast in January 1896 saw temperatures climb to 49 degrees, that's Celsius, and killed 437 people. And there's old photos of livestock dead in the heat and people, it was just an insanely hot period in 1896. But they conveniently ignore this stuff because it's like happening right now. So they've got to create this huge alarm around it. And they don't say anything about the fact that earlier on this month that Australia, let me just find this. I can't see it at the moment, but they had the coldest summer day ever recorded in Australia. But you'll never hear that because that doesn't fit in with the global warming hypothesis. Then you go to America and you've got, right at the moment, you've got places like Michigan where they've got huge snow banks. You've got the UK looking for a big freeze on Christmas Day, which, they're expecting snow to blanket much of the UK, which doesn't happen all that often. I mean, it's not super rare, but the last widespread Christmas Day snow in the UK was 2010. But they conveniently ignore all this. Forget the cold stuff. Let's just focus on this climate alarmism around the hot days.
Yeah. Whenever it goes up, they squawk, but whenever it goes down and sets low records, you get silence.
Exactly.
They either ignore it or they change the name.
Tony, you had on, or did you have on? Was it Scott Chapman?
Yep.
Was that the guy's name?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I like that guy. That guy is really good. And he's the guy that investigated substantially the GSM, the Grand Solar Minimum, and through his work, it kind of was a paradigm shift for me. It was like, wow, things are going to get cold. They're going to get, they're not. I don't buy into the climate change stuff. No, I buy into climate change completely, but it's not man's climate change. It's a cyclical thing, and right now we're into a grand solar minimum, which is we're heading down the hill. It's getting colder and colder, and like Scott said, that you're going to hear the word unprecedented quite often because there will be super highs and super lows, and the weather's going to be pretty radical for the coming years ahead.
Totally, I agree.
Yeah.
Now, I guess we'll get off the climate change since our time's racing along. there's so many other things going on which are very much end times related. So yeah, what are your guys' thoughts on some of the other things, Gary?
Okay. Can I just say one thing more thing about climate change?
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
First, well, okay. First of all, you can make a study say anything you want it to, and so that's what they do. Just like with vaccines, 5G, if they ever do a real study on it, anything like that. And just drugs in general, they can make the study say anything they want to. But and I just wanted to go. You were talking about Maurice Strong and some of that. So this is a quote from a book. This is very short, and this is the last thing I want to say about this. So a book by Elaine Dewar. Don't know who she is, but she studied this and wrote a book, Cloak of Green, and this is what she said. Strong was using the UN as a platform to sell a global environment crisis and the global governance agenda. And that's really what it's all about, I believe, is just control, bringing it. This is just another way of making people feel like no nations can do this by themselves. So we have to put all the nations together and create this beast system, global government. And that's really what it is. That's another way to push us towards that. That's all I have to say about that.
That's a good point. If you boil down everything that's happening, everything you hear in the news, and just kind of boil it down, we're heading towards the one world government, the cashless society. Things are really accelerating for that. And the interesting thing is, just kind of looking back at the last year or so. I mean, the amount of earthquakes that we're experiencing. I've got a app on my phone, earthquake app. Oh my gosh! And I have it set for over 5 on the Richter scale, so I hear nothing below that. It's going off all the time. There's a lot of moving and shaking going on out there, and that there's with the GSM happening and the magnetic field out there's just so many things that are not going our way, so to speak, on planet Earth. We're moving into an era of just Gary, you were talking about not being comfortable.
Yeah.
And we're moving into an era where you're not going to call Tony. We have here, it's called Grubhub, and you call and you can order fast food and they'll deliver it to you. We're getting so lazy we can't even make it through the drive-through now. and so fat, dumb, and happy. Well, actually, we'll change that to fat, dumb, and unhappy, because that's what happens to wealthy brats. They're not happy, and nothing makes them happy. It seems like that's where we're going as a people, actually as a world, kind of the wealthy part of the world. But with the way everything is moving, let me go back to the one world government, and then you've got the planet Earth itself, and it's shaking, and there's rains and hurricanes, and just a lot of natural disasters, and that's concerning. And where I live in the middle of the high desert in New Mexico, there's not really a fault line. They've seen a tornado once in like a generation here. There isn't a lot of rain, but there's a lot of wind, regular wind, and so I'm kind of buffered from all sorts of things. But man, there's people that get it. They have to worry about the hurricane every season, and so you know there's going to be a change coming down the road, and we're going to have to, like I always say, prepare for that, and prepare. There's so many ways to prepare, and everybody's way of preparation is different. And if you'll humor me for a minute, I'll tell a little story. My life has changed. My preparations have changed, and everything else. My wife got cancer. It's coming on 4 years ago now, and we're still in the heat of the battle. And today she sends me a picture. She's in Illinois, and I'm here in New Mexico. she sent me a picture, and she's like, this. She just got a cornea transplant. The reason being is she got a stem cell transplant 3 years ago or so, and that's caused dry eyes, and then everything else is just her body's kind of rejecting it a little bit. So there's a lot of side effects. So she's got this problem now today with her cornea, her new cornea. She got a cornea transplant, and that a suture. It turns out a suture came out, and that was a big sigh of relief. But there's so many little things that I've had to roll with the punches, so to speak. There's a new change every day. Today, a couple hours ago, my dad went into the hospital, and he's tomorrow is his 90th birthday, and so and that's in Illinois again. I'm going to. Matter of fact, when I'm done with this, I'm heading to Illinois. But when we make our plans in life, and something happens to upset those plans, we have to be agile enough to adjust for them, and not just set in our ways that everything else is going to have to move around us. That's not the way it works. Sometimes it has to be that way, but generally you have to roll with the punches, and so these things are coming my way, and I've had this like long-term plan that I've tried to work out, and it's not working out because life. And so and that's my personal little microcosm of life as you see it. And we see the impeachment, and we see the big weather coming, and we see this and that, and we can plan and prepare for those things. But the cancer and the this, that, or the other thing, we really can't prepare for that. We just have to roll with it when it comes. And the point I'm trying to make is be flexible enough to adjust for when you get the phone call, or when this happens or that happens. I play a lot of scenarios in my head of the phone call or whatever. I don't know why I do that, but I try to prepare mentally, and I think that's half of preparing, is being mentally prepared for something coming at you. And honestly, some things have happened, and I mulled them over in my mind before they happened. I just happened to think about them, but I wasn't prepared for it. But I had to adjust. So that's the point I'm making, is with all this big macro stuff happening, one, you need to prepare physically, and then two, you need to prepare spiritually, and three, you need to be. Wait, I have to say this. Three, Epstein didn't kill himself. You know how everybody's doing that.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to. But three, you gotta be flexible in your preparations, and in your life, and in your even in your thinking, to make your adjustments to whatever comes your way. Because when things start really happening in our society that are macro, I mean, not in our own personal life, but when they start coming, I'm talking about just major change. We're going to see the man of sin come on the scene, and things are just going to go boom, 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 just like dominoes, and things are really going to change very quickly, and every day it'll be like a huge change. So, are you ready for that? And here's another thought that just popped in my mind. I read a thing where when there was people in the towers, 9/11 in the towers, and they were sitting at their desk. The power was cut to the building, and they were sitting at their terminal just looking at it, and they were frozen with fear that this can't be happening. They were just overwhelmed, and they were overloaded. I was on a boat wreck, and there was 28 people on the boat. The girl next to me died when the boat flipped. And out of those 28 people that were on that boat, there was 2 people that were of any value helping others. That was myself and another guy. And that was a real life situation that happened to me. And if you get into a super big, intense thing like a boat flipping with a bunch of people on it, that's a big deal. That causes what I say. Everybody will go on tilt. Everybody went on tilt. Out of 28 people, 2 didn't, and it was kind of like every man for himself, and that's what I see coming down the road, and I try to explain it to people and tell people that you get your thinking in place as best you can, you get your preps in place as best you can, you spiritually prepare as best you can, and then live. You don't live to prep, but you prep to live.
Yeah, good points. Okay, we're coming up to having to look at wrapping up, I guess. So, Gary, I'll let you, share the last few thoughts.
Okay, so what Fred was talking about there, I think it's a good lesson for what's happening in the world. I think that's what you were saying, Fred, that the boat is either getting very unseaworthy, and hopefully it's not going to flip all the way over. But anyway, we need to be ready, and those can keep our heads about us when that happens, and we can help ourselves and help people around us if we do. But the other thing that we had mentioned, we didn't get to really talk about it, but I think the church, the majority of the church, is not ready and is being led down a very bad path. There's, a lot of them are listening to the prosperity gospel, or thinking that dominionist kind of a thing, the NARA thing, and that we're going to make the world great again, so to speak, by our votes or by our politics or whatever, instead of actually reading the Word of God and taking it for what it says. They're just being swept into all kinds of deception. And that seems to be part of the storm, along with all this other stuff. Part of the chaos is what is happening to the church right now. And so, we need to tell as many believers as we know and as we can. We need to be watchmen, really, and to tell them what's going on so that they are aware and are prepared also.
Yep, very true. Yeah, so I guess we'll look to wrap up. I want to say thanks to you guys, Gary, Huffman, and Fred, the ET Prepper, for being on the A Minute to Midnight show. And of course, these guys are both moderators in our forum, on our Facebook group. And of course, we do also have a forum on the A Minute to Midnight website for people to join if you want to there. Yeah, thank you guys for being on the show today. It's been really good, and this will be the last time before the end of the year that we're together.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. And can I say Merry Christmas?
Yep, go for it.
And Happy New Year.
Absolutely.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you, Tony. Yeah, and we just appreciate everything you do. You put a lot into this ministry called A Minute to Midnight, and I think it really does help a lot of people, and I wish it would grow. It's getting a lot of pressure from the social media people, so we know we're on the right track. So thanks, Tony.
Yeah, thank you.
And folks, visit aminutemidnight.com, and we put all our shows there in audio and video format, as well as on YouTube. Please give this a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to our iTunes channel and our YouTube channel. And if you want to help A Minute to Midnight, you can donate to us on aminutemidnight.com. We run this 100% by donations, and your help is greatly appreciated, believe me. And Merry Christmas to everyone, and we'll be back hopefully with another show in a few days' time. Until then, God bless and have a great week.